Hello. Welcome to another World of Warships battleship inspection. And it's yet another OG. It's the Yamato. Why would you play Yamato in 2024? Well, me personally, I don't really play Yamato in 2024 a whole lot. I think Yamato is still a very, very, very solid battleship. Um, like very respectable guns against all targets. You do obviously have this 32 overmatch. The accuracy is decent. Um, I find a lot of things about the experience of playing the Yamato frustrating. What do I find frustrating? Well, you have just a glacial turret traverse. We're talking basically a full minute almost of turret traverse. You have a frustratingly bad vertical dispersion. The dispersion overall is quite decent, kind of around Montana levels, but the dispersion vertically is quite frustrating. So this leads to a lot of broadside targets, especially at close range. Ships that should just like get one shot, blow up, take 40, 50k. You get like maybe one citadel on them for some reason. The maneuverability, the speed is pretty mediocre as well. But the consistency of the guns, because of the overmatch, is still a strong thing. I mean, you see there. It's kind of what I'm talking about. We got a broadside target, and we did less damage to the broadside target than we did to this Shikishima, like across the map. Um, and Yamato's hull is really just a Stone Age game design. Um, Compared to the modern battleships in this game. The Citadel is enormous. It's massively out of the water. Um, but another asset the guns have is they do have high penetration. Something like 16 kilometers flat broadside Shikishima. We're kind of at the range where on the main belt, even something like Montana is going to struggle to get citadels. And then Yamato can still kind of comfortably get it. And the Yamato hull is very interesting because it's kind of exclusively bad against its own ship, if that makes sense. Like, Yamato versus Yamato fights are just an exercise in suffering depending on who gets the worst RNG. Uh, you probably have the easiest battleship hull in the game to be punished by 460, by 32 overmatched guns, right? Um, pretty pretty bad play here by me. I basically just did not realize that the Shima was able to get this close. Um, wasn't really paying attention. So ate a ton of permanent torpedo damage. Some other asset the Yamato theoretically has going for it is you do have quite good torpedo protection. Now, I think as we've mentioned in some other videos, that's obviously only applying to the torpedo belt. Okay, it's applying to the torpedo belt, but it does the way Wargaming considers torpedo protection belts is very, very wonky. I mean, you see here the dispersion is like very decent, right? Very decent. Particularly the horizontal is quite good. I mean, you're around like a Montana, and then you just have like a bit worse vertical dispersion. But anyway, torpedo protection, actually the rules around like flooding actually apply to ships with no torpedo protection, um, which is kind of a very strange mechanic in the game. But even a ship like Austin that doesn't have visible torpedo protection does actually get mitigated flooding chance on its citadel belt. So even if you're looking at a ship in armor viewer, just something to know is the citadel is the torp protection. Now, if there is no torp protection present, then the ship itself probably doesn't get reduced damage when getting hit midships, right? But the flood modifiers will apply. Uh, so you do have a pretty good torp protection belt. Now the problem is it really only spans from like midway from the center of the rear barbette to the center of the forward barbette, right? So almost 50% of your hull is totally exposed to torpedoes. And then because you're so big, so immaneuverable, so slow, don't have great concealment, you're just such a nice torpedo target, right? Like you're going to be hit by more torpedoes than a lot of battleships. So even though you have theoretically good torpedo protection, it's not really coming in that clutch for you. But what Yamato has going for it, I mentioned this all the way back in the Incomparable Rant review. 460 millimeter and up battleships, right? The battleships with 32 millimeters of overmatch actually do functionally play as if they are DPM ships. They can. That doesn't mean you should always spam on cooldown, right? Sometimes the target's going to be better. But because at any angle, at any range, on any battleship, there's about 20 to 40% of the deck, sometimes 100% of the deck, right? A lot of upper belt or upper bow. Because all of these parts on a ton of battleships are very exposed and have 32 millimeters of plating, you do kind of have the ability to spam on cooldown with AP, and it's something that's very unique to these 460 plus millimeter guns. A reason why I recommended reload on the Incomparable, because it actually kind of is a DPM ship, right? You can just park on battleships and just spam, 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 and that's kind of what the Yamato has going for it. Is the guns are not consistent in the way that Montana guns are consistent or Vermont guns are consistent, where you have a high gun volley with good accuracy and you consistently punish broadsides for a Citadel plus and like 20 to 50k, right, on cruisers or battleships. The Yamato kind of trades, and this is down to like why the vertical dispersion, if we're being honest with ourselves, has to be bad, because like if Yamato could somehow punish broadsides as well as Montana, then like that would obviously be fucking absurd, right? Like if this thing had the same vertical dispersion as Montana, that would be fucking batshit overpowered, obviously. And listen, you do have, like I said, you have improved penetration, right? Like the penetration is high. The shell arcs aren't the best, right? They're not the easiest shells to land, but they're okay. So, the gun experience on the Yamato is still pretty good, aside from punishing flat broadside targets. You just tend to not get a ton of citadels due to the vertical dispersion. But the experience in the Yamato is definitely like low frustration for the player, I think, and that's because of this overmatch. Like we're shooting at these targets at super, super, super long range. Like at this range, really all I could hope for in something like a Montana, even a Vermont, would be he's flat enough and I have to like pick out upper belt, right? I would have to pick out upper belt salvos at this kind of range. I mean, he slowed down and we missed, but you just don't need to be as careful with your aim in the Yamato. And that, is definitely giving you a lot of resilience. I mean, but this is a situation, right? Like this is a blown up Worcester. But look where I aimed, right? A little bit behind, but because remember the Worcester doesn't really have a citadel behind the rear turrets. It's still like a third of his total HP and he's almost dead, right? So, I mean, as with all of these battleship reviews, it's going to be a theme that just like the idea that battleship players cry about not blowing up flat cruisers, like I underled that guy. Now, that would have been a kill in Montana, most likely, because I would have had better vertical dispersion and I would have had higher shell count, right? So the 9 guns on Yamato does not feel as good against broadsides. Again, assuming you can citadel them and assuming you don't require overmatch in any way, then definitely I do think that, the Montana is a bit more resilient in a defensive way, and the Yamato is a bit more resilient in an offensive way, if this is making sense. So like obviously when you angle like this in a Montana, you will virtually never take a citadel. You have a massively improved heal, a massively improved damage control, way better turret traverse, like kind of the same reload, but on more consistent guns against broadsides, right? So the Montana is way more resilient to incoming damage overall from all types of ships, and it's a bit more comfy to play and easier to survive in. But the Yamato is really, really resilient to the kinds of ships you're shooting at because of the overmatch and what the enemy ships are doing, right? Like, if you're in a Montana and you're shooting at Bourgogne at 18 kilometers and he sees the shells coming and he angles in very, very aggressively, then you will all of a sudden get almost all ricochets, right? You will get maybe a couple superstructure hits if you're lucky. Um, and then Yamato, like he can't angle, right? Obviously, you overmatch him, so you still get damage, right? And that's kind of inherently why overmatch is frustrating, obviously for the victim, because it feels like no matter what you do, there's no real way to like truly reliably mitigate the damage received. But you see the kind of reload we have, like a 22-second reload. Um, we'll talk about the ledge mod a bit. The ledge mod on Yamato is good, but I do think the idea that it's a 100% pure buff is not truly correct, because Yamato actually has DPM guns because of the overmatch, right? There is no target in the game. You don't overmatch a substantial portion of their hull. And this is what we mean by, like, normally when we say battleships aren't DPM ships, right? Like, Conqueror is a DPM ship because it just spams HE that pens everything. Thunderer is a DPM ship because it spams HE that pens at everything. Colombo and Lauria are DPM ships that, like, that's why these ships are all extra turbo bananas, overpowered and broken in arms race with reload buffs, because something like a Vermont is not even kind of a DPM ship. Like, there are many times in Vermont you hold your shot for a minute plus because the opportunity cost of missing is so high. But like ships like Yamato, Shikishima, Hanover, Incomp, Satsuma, Borgo, or Thunderer, Conqueror, Loria, all of these ships, they are DPM ships because you just shit guaranteed pen damage into people, right? Um, and that's kind of like the idea with Yamato, because you have such good range, you can take reload for free. So like it's kind of in a weird position where you have like a very good reload on almost US battleship accuracy, right? Overall. Um but again, because of the nature of the guns, like it just is a DPM ship. Like a 55-degree angled target that you would shoot Montana AP into the superstructure on, like in Yamato, you just hit the bow, hit the upper belt on a lot of ships, hit the stern on a lot of ships, or hit the superstructure, like, right? Obviously your accessible amounts of platings that you can pen are way, way higher. So this is what I mean when I say that it's just inherently a more both DPM and more resilient ship. Like I don't think any of these salvos on Shikishima were like we had him flat broadside once and we got a citadel, right? But if you recall, he was at like 16.5 kilometers. Um Very dubious if you get a citadel at that range in something like Montana or GK, right? And then we just we shot some destroyers, not a super high damage game. As always, we're looking at back-to-back games. I think I played three today, and then we are looking at games 1 and 2, I think. But it's just the gun experience on Yamato is very consistent. But it does kind of require, I think, you to like think about the battleship guns in a slightly different way. If that makes sense. Like you don't necessarily care about the broadsides, and you're also not like the most consistent broadside smasher either. Um, which is like just again we're gonna gripe about the battleship player base. Like they play a ship like Yamato or incomparable, and they don't 60k everything that goes flat to them, and they cry about it. But meanwhile, like, what was that first salvo we had on Shikishima? I think we got like 3 or 4 pens on him or something. Like, I'm pretty sure we like 20 plus K'd this guy basically bow in, right? And like, the idea that you can do that to people and then not have slightly worse vertical dispersion so you can't stack 8 citadels on people at even at close range is like fucking insane. Like, what are we doing? Right? Oh man, this guy tried. This guy really tried. I mean, look at this. Like, this is just the state, right? The state of teams, the state of blowouts. Like, we didn't even get high damage and a bit of destroyer damage, but I'm MVP basically because our team shit on them so hard, right? But you can see like the consistency of the guns. It's just like ignoring angling. And that is something that Yamato still does in tier 10 more consistently, right? Because you have the 9 shells on this like 26-second reload. And something like Shikishima, right? It has a faster reload, and it has more damage per shell, but the salvo weight is still not quite as good. It's a bit more accurate because it has the ledge mod built in. Incomp has kind of like a similar thing going for it as Shikishima, but with even a bit more accuracy, right? But the Yamato still does have, in tier 10, the most consistent ignore your armor salvo in the game. I really do think that it does. Yeah, something like Shikishima, obviously, you could maybe argue a bit better at broadsides simply because the opportunity, right? Because of the reload. But when it comes to just like bow and targets, at tier 10, I think Yamato is still like the most consistently frustrating battleship to play against in any other battleship, unless you're in something weird like GK, when we just looked at that, where you have like a crazy icebreaker on that thing. But like any battleship with 32, they all have 32 or worse nodes, right? But any of them without an icebreaker, the Yamato is still unbelievably frustrating to fight against. And yeah, there's power creep in the sense that like Satsuma is just a better Yamato. Like inarguably, it's kind of like why play Yamato when you have Satsuma, which is quite fair. But obviously Yamato is tier 10. You do tend to get only tier 10 matchmaker, especially at certain times of the day, at least in North America. If you don't play a super ship, you're very likely to just not play against super ships, right? Or like here we have like Yamagiri, we have a bunch of super ships, right? But like you still have the gimmick, right? Like Yamato's gimmick is still, in my opinion, not dethroned. I think the player base argues that it's dethroned because it used to be the only ship with 32 overmatch, and that argument I do think is fair. But when it comes to consistency, I mean, you're the only thing with this kind of overmatch in 9 guns, right? In tier 10, it's you and Shikishima with 6 guns and Incomp with 6 guns, right? And then you have to go into super ships to find 8 gun battleships with this kind of overmatch. So like in tier 10, like Yamato is still the king of ignore the fucking armor. It really is. I mean, also we can talk about maybe the other things because yes, 32 overmatch is nice, but you also have to remember that of course with 32 overmatch you also get 30, which is not just good against overmatching cruisers. There's quite a lot of ships with troll armor. Napoli is like always my go-to example, right? That a lot of these ships with troll armor have troll armor almost exclusively against standard pen angle guns with under 30 millimeters of overmatch, like Napoli. Like the second you have improved penetration on Napoli or you have 30 millimeter overmatch, the Napoli's troll armor just literally just goes out the window, and it's like one of the most consistent cruisers in the game to just blow up one shot, right? Um, and the Yamato is just so future proofed, which is why it will always be good. Like, I don't think there will just ever be a point in this game where the Yamato will have no ability to play the game in random battles. Now, you do suffer quite heavily against carriers and subs because of your maneuverability. Also, um, for some reason, we'd already talked about the turret traverse. It's so interesting. I don't really know what Wargaming has against the Japanese because they exploit the weeb player base like mad. But for some reason, on every time they come out with a battleship that is IJN, it gets 3 features. The HE is slow as fuck. Historical accuracy. Yeah, shut the fuck up. That's not a thing in this game. The HE is slow as fuck and extremely difficult to aim with. The turret traverse is glacial, like 45 plus seconds base. And then also, I think most crucially, because those two things, like HE being slow, like on Bungo, literal skill issue. Like you can make Bungo HE work. It's some of the most fucking overpowered and demonic HE in the game, actually. Um, Yamato HE is like almost never worth using because you overmatch battleships, but like the Alpha Strike is like demonic as well. Like, we're at Conqueror HE basically. Of course, on Yamato, there's like no reason to use it because if you overmatch parts of every single ship in the game, like you would just go for pens. But anyway, what I was getting at is the damage control party. You still get 10-second base. The Americans get 20-second base. The Germans get 15. The French, the British, the Italians, they all get 15. And of course, this means that all of these ship lines, you will see me recommend it in every single battleship review I've done pretty much. All of these ship lines with 15 plus second base DCP duration are prime candidates, for the demented as fuck cold DCP mod, which gives you, even on ones with 15-second base, like a 23 something second damage control. So even if you slot that on Yamato, the best you can get up to is about 15 seconds, which makes it not really worth it. And it's just a very interesting feature. It's just, it's a kind of an example, I think, of a really good example of power creep, because Wargaming decided back in the day that, like, obviously the Yamato had to have some kinds of downsides for this gun performance, especially considering, when your competition is mostly like Montana and GK, and you're about as accurate as Montana with only a turret less, and you get 32 overmatch, right? And you're also the only ship with 30 overmatch at one point. That, like, these downsides made sense in an old version of World of Warships, but yeah, these days these are just, I don't know. In a non-sub, non-CV game, it's not really a problem. Also, a target like the Marseille, something to keep in mind is we're kind of like really at this angle. We're not going to get citadels on his belt because he's kind of too angled. So we are trying to like cheek him a bit, right? We're trying to hit him like kind of right underneath. You see that rear turret right next to the base of the superstructure. Our idea is trying to hit him like right exactly there where those shells are clumping up at, right where that citadel happened. That's where we're aiming. And you don't need Yamato to do that. You know, and I don't dislike the Yamato. I don't want this to sound, maybe it does, I don't want it to sound like I don't think the ship is worth playing. I still think, as far as like tech tree battleships go, I think it's extremely like new player friendly because you just ignore armor. You're extremely tanky when bow in, actually. Again, though, unless people have 32 overmatch on you, and then you're like uniquely non-tanky because Shell's fuses don't even have to delay from the bow to the citadel because you have the angled cheek, so people can like just hit you with 32 overmatch guns like right next to the turret near the water, and it's like guaranteed citadels, right? Also, Marseille deck is 36, so there's not really a battleship in the game that overmatches his deck. But the frustrating parts of Yamato, to me, come down to, I would say almost exclusively the ability or lack thereof to reposition and to change your game plan, to adapt to the situation. You're so incredibly locked into what you originally decided to do. Kind of like how old Vermont was. I think this is a fairly logical comparison. Old Vermont had a lot of similarities to Yamato. They're both quite slow. They were both quite immaneuverable. And, they didn't get, like, Vermont didn't have the improved heal cooldown back then, obviously, but Vermont had, like, crazy amounts of pen. I actually despise the change they made to Vermont. I don't even enjoy playing it since then as much. That's an aside. We'll get to that in the Vermont video at some point. I hate that. That is a bit of game design that I despise with every fiber of my being, the changes they made to Vermont. Anyway, this is a Yamato video. Of course. But it's kind of the similar concept to Old Vermont, where like you had to get your positioning right, and I do appreciate that. Like, I appreciate that. We talked about this in the Montana video. That yes, Montana technically has a citadel, right? It's accessible. It's on the waterline. It's accessible. Overmatchable roof. If you go flat broadside, you definitely can take citadels. But like, if I'm in Montana, and I'm at 12 kilometers to another Montana, and I'm bow in, and I'm going to die, right? I'm 100% dead if I sit bow in, but I'm full HP, and I can turn out. I'm just always going to turn out. Like, at close range even. Against basically any battleship in Montana, I can turn out. Because, yeah, I might take 1 or 2, maybe 3 citadels if I'm crazy unlucky, but, like, the citadel's so hard to hit, even on Montana. Like, the odds that they're going to stack 3 shells plus on the citadel are quite low. You see here again, Setsuma does have basically the same angled citadel under the cheek that Yamato does. So again, though, having the 460 guns like is not 100% required to cheek. right? It's not required to cheek Yamato, but it does just help a lot because it completely ignores the bow angling, um, which is, obviously quite cool. But, this guy's upper belt is 32, right? His bow is 32, just like mine. So this is just like literal RNG. I mean, this fight is just pure RNG. Like, assuming we both know where to shoot each other. You see this angle that I'm at, 34 degrees? Um, that is way too much broadside. Way too much broadside. Typically speaking, the angle where you can get citadeled semi-reliably in Montana is actually as low as about 27 degrees, and that's just the ships that don't overmatch you. Like if you are 27 degrees to a Montana, you can get citadeled under the front guns. Now, obviously, even going perfectly bow in, like, see here, we're at a 24-degree angle. He can't. There's a citadel, right? That's not, and then I get one, and he's at 30 degrees. So he's too broadside. I am not too broadside. It doesn't matter. Anything hitting right where this curvature of the bow is that you see my cursor on, anything hitting there with overmatch, it does not matter how you're angled. If it is on the citadel, it's a citadel. Very, very cool. But you see what I mean by this vertical dispersion? Like, it's quite troll. It's undeniably just quite troll in certain situations. The 32 millimeter upper belt is a massive weakness. I would actually strongly make the case that the upper belt on Yamato is more of an issue than the cheek, because there's nothing you can do about the upper belt. As long as you're not against a ship that also overmatches you everywhere, like Satsuma, that fight's a bit fucked, obviously. But as long as they don't have overmatch on you, as long as you don't show more than, like 25 degrees, you're fine, right? You're not going to get citadeled through the cheek at 20 degrees in this thing, or perfectly bow in, whatever. But that upper belt, man, that upper belt is rough. Like, every cruiser with 203 plus guns in the game just has so much HE full pen on you. Yeah, your deck, we'll look at an armor view as always, but the deck has fairly decent platings on it. But that upper bow, you get raped by cruiser HE because of the upper belt. You get raped by all AP, like every destroyer AP, right? Like basically anything at any range. I mean, like when daring AP at 10 kilometers is viable, your battleship has no armor, right? Like I would strongly make the case. I feel like the biggest issue with the armor is actually that belt being 32. Because you can mitigate that cheek damage like by just having hands, essentially. I mean, yeah, it's frustrating, obviously, but like there's things you can do about it. But like a Des Moines spamming Yamato with HE versus Montana with HE is like a legitimate night and day difference. Because Montana has that 38. GK's whole side plating obviously is good. I mean, you just see how stringy the vertical dispersion is. It's a bit better with the legendary mod, obviously, but it's a problem. As far as this game goes, it's become quite awkward, and you just don't have the speed to change what your plan is. Like once you're committed in the Yamato to a position, you're fairly committed to it, and I'm gonna, my tone is suggesting that that's bad, but it's only bad in the sense that other battleships that are just overpowered, straight up overpowered, don't have this issue. And I wish they did, right? Like, I legitimately wish that every battleship had to play similarly to Yamato, right? I don't want them all to have the same guns, play identically the same. I'm not saying that. But the concept of, like, positioning and committing to a position is required, like, because your guns are so slow. Like, I wish every battleship in the fucking game had glacial turret traverse. If I could wave my magic fucking wand, you would never be able to get a single battleship's guns to turn faster than like 45 seconds. Maybe 40, but certainly 40. You just never would. I don't care what nation. I don't care what caliber guns. If it was up to me, Yamato maybe would have worse turret traverse because of the overmatch, but even something like these 30-second based battleships, it It drives me insane. It just actually drives me insane. The fucking. All right. We're talking about Yamato. We're not gonna rant. So you have significant downsides. Now, is Yamato balanced? Man, I've said it in Montana. I said it in GK. Are any battleships balanced against anything but other battleships? I mean, I don't know, dude. Like, there's no cruiser that's killing this thing 1v1. I mean, there just isn't. Like, in a pure 1v1, full HP, like, you're not dying to anything in the Yamato unless you just let it kill you. You're not dying to, like, a gunboat unless he farms you for 8 minutes. You're not dying to torps unless a Shima, like, torps you with 5 cooldowns. I mean, I don't know. Yamato feels like it's balanced because you play other battleships. This is the take, right? Yamato feels like it's balanced because there are things about it that are frustrating and difficult to do, right? Repositioning is quite difficult. Staying dark is quite difficult. Switching targets to cross map because of the turret traverse is quite difficult. You have a horrifically bad upper belt. You have a high out of the water citadel. You have the ability to get smashed through the bow. You have all of these weaknesses. But, like, at the end of the day, is it, like, fair that here we're a bit under half HP with a 23-second reload? Like, is it balanced that I can just shit armor-ignoring AP into any target in the entire game? And then just, like, depending on how the RNG goes, they just take gigantic fucking damage? Like, I don't know, dude. So in this game, the points are reversed, by the way, at the top. Keep in mind, this game, the points are reversed. We have 730, they have 450, right? So our Hindenburg's getting the cap. He's playing smart. I'm holding D. So what is the play here? Well, what I need is I need the Schlieffen to commit on me. That is what I need, right? I mean, like, and to angling in, right? We take that hit at 26 degrees. Technically speaking, probably could get cheeked at that angle for a Citadel. Very unlikely, though. But the reload is crazy. Like, reload mod Yamato is, like, kind of a vibe, man. I mean, the amount of fucking damage output this thing has is kind of crazy. So what I'm doing is I'm getting to this rock, but I don't want to commit to turning out just yet. There you go, another 15k just shitting into his upper bow and superstructure. I need the Schlieffen to commit. And I would say, like, right about now, he's at the point where he can't turn, right? This is the theory. He can't turn and go push the Hindenburg. So it's totally fine if he kills me now. I'm just stalling time. That's really all I'm doing. He's going to kill me. I mean, pretty much no matter what. Like, there's no winning against a Schlieffen in something like Yamato because you're covered in 32, right? He actually basically suicided to me here too, and then I just didn't reload quite in the nick of time to kill him. So I'm reversing, and you can see my rudder's locked to the right. I'm at 35 degrees, but he can't quite shoot over this island yet, I don't think. So by the time he gets a shot right... I mean, this guy has no idea what he's aiming at, so that's pretty helpful too. I should have shot slightly earlier, I think, because I thought I had time to get 2 shots off, and I did, but I didn't shoot quite early enough. If you watch the reload here, like, he's going way too broadside to me for literally no reason. And then you watch the reload when I die. I think I'm like 1 second from shooting. Yeah, 1.2 seconds. So he would have died, right? But we forced him to commit, and so now that's a free win. But, pretty much any battleship that's come out in the last 2-3 years would just have the maneuverability, the speed to just completely dive behind that island, right? Like, in something like a Yamato, you actually have to make fucking educated decisions on how you want to play the game, how you want to position, which feels to us as battleship players, especially as battleship mains, it feels bad because all of a sudden you're playing a ship that doesn't have cruiser speed, cruiser concealment, like disgusting point and click accuracy. Like, Yamato has like very decent accuracy, and with ledge mod it has very good accuracy, but it doesn't have like the point and click dispersion of like Thunderer, Loria, Wisconsin. You know, even like Vermont, because you're more accurate with a better shell count, right? Um, Yamato has things about it that like I don't want to say balance it, but keep it in check. I think like that's the better way of putting it because like a truly balanced battleship would still to me not look like the Yamato. Um, like to me, a balanced battleship would look like the Montana with a Yamato hull. Like if you want my opinion on this, I mean, a balanced battleship would be like Montana with Yamato's horrific hull, and Yamato's turret traverse and Yamato's speed. Like that would be like a maybe balanced battleship. Like no overmatch, horrible turret traverse, horrific hull. I mean, these platings that we have, even some of the older platings, but like everything now that's newer, like even ships with overmatchable parts. I mean, we've just gotten out of control with the game design on battleship plating. Like I said in the Hindenburg video, um, like that's why Hindenburg is so good still is because the battleship platings are just legitimately out of fucking control these days. Um, Kind of sketchy that this guy's turning back in, but you know he's not. As long as he's not going broadside, he's never gonna die of the Schlieffen, right? So you know, fair play, greeting for another kill. I can respect it, right? I can respect it as long as he doesn't fuck up the angling, which he didn't. He's gonna live, so good. I don't know why the chat's disabled. Hmm. But we were conversing in this one. You know, I was telling my Hindenburg my plan. I was just gonna make the Schlieffen commit on me. All he had to do was cap and then live. He agrees, and he played really well. So, wouldn't have won this game without a competent guy in this Hindenburg because our team was playing quite dementedly. As you saw when I was pushing through the cap, we had full HP battleships camping behind me. Um, Battleship players who bait their team when they're on high HP because the theoretical possibility of getting in a bad position and then dying. Like, I took a lot of shit to get up on that island, right? I took a lot of shit to get up there, but I took all of the fire off of my team. I forced the cruisers back into spawn. I put them in an impossible situation. Stop baiting your fucking team, man. Like, oh, dude, it's so frustrating. And you saw that this guy was like the only person who didn't bait me. Like, I'm in a battleship, and it's a cruiser who backs me up. Like my at the time almost full HP battleships are baiting me, and then it's the fucking Hindenburg that has to push in to help me. Like it's just this fucking battleship community, man. It just drives me up a fucking wall. Um, but like the Yamato just is so consistent still. I don't I don't play it a lot, and it has nothing to do with it being bad. There are ships I don't play like I don't play GK because it's bad. Like like I said, 1 out of 10 games, it's better than Montana. 9 out of 10, it's worse. So why would you ever play it over Montana, right? You're just like chasing the high of those rare games. You like get 300K in a brawl, but like Yamato's just so consistent, um, and like an extremely tanky hull bow in as long as there's no 32 overmatch. So like you're quite tanky bow in. You have very decent accuracy with high pen AP with overmatch. Like you suffer mad against CVs and subs a lot more than other battleships. I think that's mostly just speed, turning, and then the DCP. Not being able to have a high duration DCP makes you suffer mad against sub homing. Um, but it's just like a consistent ship. Like I don't really get shit games in Yamato, if that makes sense. Because, like, at the end of the day, there's always something on the enemy team, like a Borgone, like even a Satsuma, right? Yoshino and stuff like this, where it's like, doesn't matter. You ignore angling. I mean, you're still the only tech tree tier 10 that has this overmatch, right? So, like, I still think it's probably it's also a good like to me. I see the Montana recommended as a ship that teaches people how to play battleships, but I would make the argument that Yamato teaches you how to play battleships better because I actually think that Montana is like straight up stronger and like more gimmicky than Yamato. And people claim that Montana doesn't have a gimmick because it only has 406 millimeter guns. And then, like, I guess we're just ignoring the fact that, like, you're the only thing with that kind of accuracy and reload on 12 guns. Like, you're the only thing with that kind of survivability at tier 10, aside from maybe Conqueror in the tech tree. Like, we're ignoring the fucking crazy, like, gimmicks that Montana has with the 31-second DCP, the 23k HP heal, like, just the crazy survivability. Like, that's not a gimmick, I guess. The battleship community thoroughly agrees that being unkillable to fires and floods and having 160,000 HP worth of healing doesn't qualify as a gimmick. Very cool, very cool take by the community in general. Yeah, you have overmatch and it's a gimmick, but like the reason why I say this about Yamato is it's so positional. Like this ship is way more positionally based than Montana. Like Montana goes like what 5 knots faster with speed flag. Um, Montana like can very consistently go flat to basically any ship in the game at 10 kilometers and not blow up. Like yeah, you might lose 30, 40, get really unlucky and lose 50k, but like in a Yamato, like you go broadside to a Vermont at 10 kilometers in the Yamato, and you tell me how much HP you think you're gonna have left. It's probably literally 0 HP remaining. You do it in Montana, and like I'd say on average, you lose 40k, right? Like you could totally do these retarded plays in Montana. You can't do in Yamato. Like there's no getting away with broadside. If they're close enough range to Citadel you in Yamato, um, you're gonna blow up. I mean, you miss angle against someone who knows where to aim at close range, you're gonna lose 40k through the bow, right? I actually think it like teaches angling. Yamato teaches like defensive play better, and offensive play worse. I think that's how I would put it. Like Yamato teaches you how to position and angle defensively incredibly, incredibly well, and manage turret traverse incredibly, incredibly well. And then Montana teaches you how to like aim and consistently punish people a bit better. But I do think like it's still a very good ship. It's just like I'm one of those battleship players now who like you play Loria and you go 40 fucking knots with brisk and 12-3 concealment and 30-second base turret traverse, and because you have sap with like 15-degree guaranteed pen angles or 20-degree guaranteed pen angles, it functionally feels like you have overmatch on 32 millimeter platings. You play like 100 games in the Laria, and then you go back to Yamato and you're like, I'm so slow, right? And then like Loria just has a better hull, like an inarguably better hull. And Loria is like the poster child of a punishable Citadel. Like people praise the game design. Like at least Wargaming gave it a Citadel. Well, like it's still nothing like Yamato. Like we'll never have a ship with the Citadel. We'll never have a BB with a Citadel again. I don't think. All right, let's quit yapping and hop into the port. Okay, equipment wise, I don't think there's any argument in slot 6. It's reload or ledge mod. Ledge mod is very good. Unfortunately, the ledge mod does also include a turret traverse hit. And this is what we're talking about. 55-second turret traverse. It's just a thing of the past, man. And then why are we running damage control? Could probably run prop mod. I would say those are like kind of the two things. The maneuverability is like, again, we're at Montana levels of rudder shift, right? But then we're just slower. It's less than I thought. It's 3 knots slower. Aiming for sure. This is a whatever. Unfortunately, you're just not a great candidate for this because you're only going to go from 11 seconds to what? Something like 15.2 or something. It's not really enough of an increase. You don't really get that turnout damage control. This is why, like, if you're wondering, on even fifth, like German and French and British battleships, I pretty much run this on everything. Or premium DCP is what I'm talking about. Cold DCP mod. Kind of like the amount of time it takes a lot of battleships to fully turn away is close to like 20 seconds. So what it lets you do is totally fuck off submarine homing. Because like if you're pushing in at an angle and you get pinged, you can just insta DCP and turn out, and it lasts so long that the torps are either already past you or you're already kited out. And then kiting battleships suffer objectively. Like kiting battleships don't even really suffer from sub homing torps at all. Like you could literally just not even use DCP on them, right? So I would say like either this or prop mod. You could run steering. You'll get down to like what a 17 and a half or so second rudder shift, which is still like pure dog shit. It's whatever. Captain build, I think this is just kind of like the spec. Yamato's like quite tanky. Again, Yamato's quite tanky. Bow in. This skill is like just fucking insane. Just an insane skill. Like improve repair party readiness was always a solid skill, and then getting that extra heal on something is just like bananas OP. Like I don't understand why this is even in the game. The problem with Yamato is like you kind of want to run brisk, because then if you run brisk, you get a pretty comfy like 31 knot speed with brisk. But like, what do you give up on Yamato to run brisk? Well, you kind of like have to give up basically improved repair party readiness, which to me is a bit of a troll. Yamato takes a lot of damage, particularly from HE, because of that upper belt and the bow. You definitely use these heals. I think you saw in the second replay I used all my heals, right? You use 6 heals in Yamato, at least I do, quite consistently, because like again, as long as you properly angle and you don't get torpedoed out, bow in, like you're extremely resilient. You will tank a lot of damage for sure. So I think it's just like overall the spec. Gun feeder on Yamato, it's like you could run it, but the thing is, you're never gonna shoot AP at like any large ship because you overmatch them. You're never gonna shoot HE typically speaking because you have the overmatch. So it's like, are you loading HE for destroyers? Well, maybe, but the HE is very slow. I think it'll tell us if we hover over this. Yeah, you see how the AP says that it's slower. It's 780 meters per. This is what I hate. This is not a rant. This is just an observation of something I hate. You look at this as a new player, right? And you see initial velocity of HE 805, initial velocity of AP 780, and you think, oh, so the HE is faster. And no, it's not. The flight time at long range for the HE is like demonically slow. If you've played Bungo, you know this. If you've played Yamato, you know this. The HE is incredibly slow velocity over range. So it's like even against destroyers, like in Bungo and Yamato, unless they're in your fucking mouth, you still would rather shoot AP just because you can consistently hit them better. So it's just not a ship I pretty much ever load HE in. Almost never, man. I just can't think of why you would. Like, why would I load HE to front gun someone for 6k in a fire when I could front gun them for 15k through the bow because I overmatched them, right? So I think this is just kind of like the build. I mean, if you die a ton in Yamato, you could maybe drop improve for brisk, because like if you're not living, then you're not making use of this, I guess. But like you tank 2 million, you get an extra heal. You're even with a decent amount of HP, right? You have like what 97,000 HP in this thing. Even with that kind of HP, you have like a 65-ish second reload. Like this is just one of the best skills in the game. It's the best 3-point battleship skill in the game. If this was 4 points, it would be worth taking. Like you would make room for it on a lot of battleships. Maybe even over something like fire prevention on some. Yeah, it's just a retarded skill. Making battleships unkillable. Very cool. Armor. It's just Stone Age tech, like I said. This is the problem. That torpedo protection belt is super nice in theory. 55% mitigation. That only applies to the area the citadel spans, right? So like, what is that on your broadside? Is that half of your ship? I always forget that wargaming is stupid and you can't look at armor without this fucking menu expanded. Yeah, I'd say it's like half of your ship is protected by the torp belt, but it's just this, like every AP shell in the game at like almost any range, even shitty destroyer AP arms on this. The superstructure is not enormous. The deck plating, like I said, is quite decent. Like if you're at very long range and things are falling on the deck, 50, 57, right? 50. Even the main deck is a bit resilient to like even Hindenburg AP. But it's just like the 32. I think we all know about Yamato Cheek. Um, it's just the profile because typically what happens is it's not the thickness. Most battleships have this weakness of like the front of the citadel is less armored, obviously. It's the fact that this is angled because normally, like, let's say you're at 45 degrees, right? Like, you can citadel any battleship in the game under the guns if they have an exposed citadel at 45 degrees. But the problem is, even if this is like 350 and it's flat, because it's angled at, say, 45 degrees, then it's effectively, 1.41 or whatever X. So it's effectively more like 500 millimeters of armor, which is fine at 5 kilometers, right? Like, where you have that kind of pen. But this is the problem is like this is flat. It's the fact that the cheek is flat at like any angle, right? Like you citadel it like here, it's flat. You citadel it at this angle, it's flat. You citadel it flat broadside, it's less armor, right? So it's just ancient game design. I wish every battleship citadel in the entire game was like this. I truly do. In my mind, battleships just like shouldn't have icebreakers. Aside from things that like have shit guns and other shit things like GK, like I'm totally fine with GK having an icebreaker, but you have to keep in mind that like icebreakers almost exclusively exist to fuck Yamato, especially back in the day. Like kind of the sole value that battleships have for having an icebreaker is Yamato doesn't sit them through the nose, and now these other 460 overmatched guns don't sit them through the nose. So like, I think it's stupid that a lot of these battleships have these thick icebreaker platings, and then yeah, um, yeah. The hull is dog shit. One of the worst battleship hulls really in the game, which keeps the boat in check. I think if you had these guns on Montana hull, would be retarded. That you would have like no ability to be citadeled. I mean, I guess we could also point out the guns basically never get broken hardly because of the plating and the angling. Still a good ship. I just find is it even that I find Yamato frustrating, or is it just that these new ships are so overpowered that like they basically make Yamato's 32 overmatch gimmick feel not as valuable as it could be? That's probably it, right? You could play like Yamato, which has overmatch, or you could play like Colombo, Laria, and then you just like spam sap into people, and it's effectively as good, if not better, than having 32 overmatch. I don't know, man. Yeah, still solid. We're rambling a bit. We'll wrap it up here. Tech tree battleships worth grinding out. Tier 10 tech tree battleships. Yamato still up there. Montana's still up there. Colombo, right? Colombo Legmont. Jesus Christ, man. Talk about a ship that's worth the grind. Yeah, that will do it for the Yamato. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.